My brother Jerry stole my identity to buy Dogecoin and Yecoin, tried to hide $50K of an 84-year-old widow's money in my account, and owed $180K to a bookie. But my investigation uncovered he'd stolen $450K from 23 elderly victims, supplied our dad with pills, and drove our mom to mortgage her home before dying from stress. Now he's serving 15 years in federal prison. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when you realize the person you trusted most has been systematically tearing your life apart, piece by piece, all to fund a bottomless addiction? That's what it felt like when I discovered my own brother Jerry hadn't just ruined my finances, he'd meticulously set me up to take the fall for everything. My brother, Jerry, has always had the financial literacy of a goldfish trying to do taxes. Seriously. Since we were kids, he'd blow his allowance on Pokemon cards faster than you could say Charizard, then guilt-trip me into lending him my lunch money. Now, at 26, he'd discovered cryptocurrency and treated it like a slot machine at a Vegas buffet, constantly feeding it money he didn't have. Every family dinner became a full-blown TED Talk about how Dogecoin would make us all millionaires. So when he asked me to invest in his new coin called Broken, claiming it would revolutionize how siblings share money, I told him I'd rather invest in a timeshare on the sun. He nodded thoughtfully, said he respected my decision, and then immediately asked if I could at least share my social security number so he could list me as a reference. That should have been my first blinding red flag. Jerry respecting boundaries while simultaneously asking for my SSN was like a burglar politely knocking before breaking down your door. I said no, of course. But it didn't matter. 3 months later, my credit score notification app started screaming like a smoke detector at a barbecue. Turns out Jerry had been using my identity to take out loans for his crypto ventures. This man had opened 7 different credit cards in my name, like he was collecting baseball cards, each one maxed out on various coins with names that sounded like rejected Pokemon, Moonpug, Rocket Shiba, and something called Yecoin. When I confronted him at our parents' house, he just calmly explained the loans were basically free money because crypto only goes up. His financial logic was so backwards, economists would need a chiropractor just to understand it. I went nuclear. I changed all my passwords, filed fraud reports with every agency that would listen, and blocked him on everything. Even LinkedIn, where he'd been trying to recruit me into his crypto MLM called Yecoin. 2 years of blissful silence followed. My credit score recovered like a phoenix from the ashes of Jerry's financial dumpster fire. I could finally apply for a mortgage without the loan officer looking at me like I'd suggested paying in Monopoly money. Life was good. Then one day, Jerry messaged me from a new number with a novel-length apology. He claimed he was in therapy now, that gambling addiction is real, and he wanted to make amends. Against my better judgment and my therapist's explicit advice, we met for coffee. The man who showed up looked different. He wore a suit that wasn't from Spirit Halloween, had a real job at an actual bank, and his hair wasn't styled like he'd been electrocuted. He handed me an envelope with $500 cash, calling it a down payment on what he owed me, roughly 3% of the total. It was like tipping a waiter after they'd set your table on fire. We talked for hours. He seemed genuinely changed. He even showed me his therapy appointment cards like they were Boy Scout badges. But then he mentioned he was really into NFTs now, but responsibly this time. My eye twitched so hard, I'm pretty sure I saw into the 4th dimension. Still, I gave him another chance. We started hanging out monthly, always in public, places where he couldn't access my wallet or personal information. He got engaged to a nice woman named Bianca, who clearly didn't know about his past life as the Wolf of Wall Street's unsuccessful cousin. Things seemed normal. Then Jerry invited me to his engagement party at some fancy downtown venue. Everything was going great until I went to grab my jacket from the bedroom. That's when I found Jerry hunched over my phone like Gollum with a ring, frantically trying to guess my banking app password. But here's the plot twist. He wasn't trying to steal money. He was trying to transfer $50,000 into my account. When he saw me, his face went whiter than printer paper. Apparently, Mr. Reformed Gambler had gotten himself into a new kind of trouble. Bianca's family wanted a detailed financial disclosure before the wedding. Standard rich people stuff. The problem was, Jerry had been hiding massive gambling debts from the past year. His brilliant plan was to temporarily park money in my account to show Bianca's family he had assets. He figured he'd move it back after the prenup was signed, like playing financial musical chairs where everyone loses except the IRS. The man looked at me with puppy dog eyes that could make Sarah McLachlan write another commercial, and asked if I could just let the transfer go through for 1 week. Just 1 week, he said, like he was asking to borrow my Netflix password instead of making me an accomplice to bank fraud. I stood there, watching my brother's engagement party continue through the doorway, his fiancée laughing with her father, while Jerry held my phone like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. My brain felt like it was buffering, trying to process how someone could go from stealing my identity for crypto schemes to defrauding both his employer and his future in-laws in one spectacular move. Things only got crazier from there. I pocketed my phone while Jerry's tell emerged, that rapid blinking that started after Dad gave him OxyContin at 17. His eyes fluttered like hummingbird wings as he knocked over champagne glasses, the crystal shattering against the marble floor. Guests turned to stare while Jerry scrambled to clean up, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. I grabbed his arm and steered him toward the venue corridor, away from Bianca's family. The hallway stretched before us, lined with abstract paintings that probably cost more than my car. Jerry wiped sweat from his forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning. He leaned against the wall, pupils pinpoint small. My stomach dropped. He was using again. The signs were all there. The sweating, the twitching, the desperate energy, radiating from him like heat from pavement. Jerry pulled out his phone, showing me banking screenshots. The $50,000 wasn't from his savings or some loan. It belonged to Mrs. Chen, an 84-year-old widow he'd been helping with investments at the check-cashing store where he worked. My brother had been managing her money for 6 months, gaining her trust with his reformed gambler story. The corridor seemed to tilt. I grabbed the wall for support, processing what he'd just admitted. My voice echoed off the walls when I finally spoke, asking if he was stealing from an elderly woman. Footsteps approached from behind. Bianca's father appeared, his expression shifting from casual interest to concern. He'd only caught fragments of our conversation, something about stealing, enough to make him pause. His tailored suit made him look like a magazine advertisement for success. He assumed we were arguing about wedding costs, offering to mediate. His hand landed on Jerry's shoulder, not comforting, but possessive, like claiming territory. Something in his grip made Jerry straighten up. The dynamic between them suddenly clear. Bianca's father needed something from my brother. I stayed quiet, watching their interaction. Jerry's phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket. He ignored it, but I caught the caller ID flashing on the screen. Mrs. Chen. She was trying to reach him, probably wondering about her money. Jerry spun a story about my jealousy over wedding expenses, how I couldn't handle him finally succeeding. Bianca's father nodded along, but his eyes stayed sharp, calculating. He mentioned his 12 Subway franchises, how family businesses required trust and discretion. The way he emphasized certain words made my skin crawl. Then, 3 crises exploded simultaneously. Mrs. Chen's son burst through the main entrance, scanning the crowd for Jerry. My phone lit up with a text from Bianca about a banking inspector at their apartment. Then Mom called, her voice shaky, asking about strange charges on her credit card. I moved to intercept Mrs. Chen's son before he could cause a scene. He was a tall man in his 50s, wearing a windbreaker despite the warm evening. His face was flushed with anger as he demanded to know where Jerry was. I tried calming him down, explaining Jerry was handling some wedding business, but my attempt to help backfired spectacularly. The son assumed I was Jerry's partner in whatever scheme was happening. He grabbed my wrist, demanding answers about his mother's missing money. Jerry chose that moment to collapse. His body went rigid, then started convulsing on the corridor floor. A real seizure, not fake. The mixing of benzos with alcohol had finally caught up. Guests rushed over. Someone called 911, and suddenly Jerry became the victim needing help. While waiting for paramedics, Bianca's teenage sister approached me. She was maybe 16, wearing a dress that made her look older. She mentioned Jerry had promised to help with her college fund investments, showing me text messages from earlier, that week. My brother was expanding his victim pool to include children. I helped gather Jerry's belongings as paramedics prepared to transport him. His jacket fell open and documents spilled across the floor. Among them was a power of attorney, form, Mrs. Chen's shaky signature at the bottom. The date was just 2 days ago. The paramedics found me holding the document, immediately assuming I'd been rifling through Jerry's things. Bianca appeared with her phone, filming everything for evidence. Her camera captured me with a stolen document, Jerry unconscious on a stretcher, and Mrs. Chen's son still gripping my wrist. Jerry's boss from Cash Quicks arrived, needing signatures on suspicious activity reports. He had no idea Jerry had been deleting flags on his own transactions for months. The man looked harried, explaining federal auditors were breathing down their necks about unusual patterns. Mom called again while they loaded Jerry into the ambulance. She dismissed my concerns about the credit card charges, saying I was being paranoid, like when Dad was dying. Her words stung because she didn't know the truth about Dad's death, how Jerry had supplied him with pills that accelerated everything. Jerry really went from crypto bro to actual bank fraud, like someone speedrunning financial crimes. That escalation from Dogecoin evangelist to elderly widow scammer deserves its own Netflix documentary. At the hospital, I discovered Jerry's most disturbing preparation. He'd been recording our conversations for 6 months using a phone app. Not just recording, but editing them, splicing words together to create confessions. He'd manufactured audio of me saying I wanted to destroy his life like he destroyed mine. My frantic text to Mrs. Chen's family trying to warn them got flagged by Adult Protective Services. Someone reported me for harassing a vulnerable elder. The complaint came from an anonymous source, but I knew it was Jerry, planning ahead even while high. The real leverage came next. Jerry controlled Mom's medication management app, the one that reminded her about heart medicine refills. He could forget to order them, miss a delivery, create a crisis. Mom's last hospitalization had been from missed doses, 3 days, in cardiac ICU. I spent the night investigating, pulling records, trying to build a case, but exhaustion caught up during the drive home. Microsleep at the wheel led to me sideswiping a parked car. The responding officer ordered a blood test, which revealed Adderall from years ago still in my system somehow. DUI charges pending. My best friend Marcus withdrew his support after Jerry offered him $25,000 to start his food truck. Marcus needed that money more than he needed to be right about Jerry. He stopped returning my calls, blocked me on social media, chose survival over friendship. The local GA chapter counselors started avoiding me. Jerry had filed anonymous reports about an unstable family member disrupting recovery meetings. I was banned from the very places where I might find others who'd encountered Jerry's schemes, isolated from potential allies. Jerry's lies grew more sophisticated. He created deep-faked audio using Mrs. Chen's voicemail greetings, making it sound like she begged him to invest her money. The technology was good enough to fool anyone who didn't know to look for artifacts. My ex-girlfriend Sarah finally admitted Jerry had been paying her student loans. In exchange, she'd been reporting my whereabouts, my habits, who I was meeting. Every move I'd made for months had been monitored and reported back to my brother. The worst discovery came from investigating Jerry's theft months ago during a family financial discussion. Jerry had added me as an authorized recipient on Mrs. Chen's account. I'd received a $3,000 gift that I thought came from Mom, but it was Mrs. Chen's money, making me look complicit in the theft. I went to check on Mrs. Chen, finding her alive but confused in her apartment. Someone photographed me leaving her building. The image cropped to make it look like I was stalking an elderly woman. Every move I made to help just deepened the trap. The final revelation hit like a sledgehammer. Jerry owed $180,000 to a bookie named Tommy Nagwan. Not from sports betting or cards, but from high-stakes poker games in a Chinatown basement. The debt was astronomical, the kind that ended with broken bones or worse. And if Jerry couldn't pay, they'd come for family next. Jerry's sponsors. Daughter Benji had been dating him for 3 months, sitting in on my NA meetings with a recording app hidden on her phone. She'd positioned herself as a newcomer, seeking support, gaining trust while capturing every vulnerable moment I shared. During our last family dinner, Jerry casually mentioned details from my Step 4 inventory, private admissions about enabling Dad's addiction by not intervening sooner. The room went silent as he recited my exact words about feeling responsible for introducing him to his first bookie. Jerry's manipulation reached new depths when he claimed I'd begged him to steal from Mrs. Chen. He showed Mom edited text messages, conversations spliced together from different contexts. The fabricated evidence painted me as the mastermind behind the elder fraud scheme. Both of us started believing our own distorted versions of reality, memory becoming unreliable under the weight of doctor proof. I found an old text I'd sent Jerry during Dad's final hospitalization. The message read, "Do whatever it takes to get us money," in reference to medical bills that were drowning our family. Jerry had saved it, waiting 2 years to recontextualize. My desperation as evidence of conspiracy. The timestamp matched perfectly with when he'd started targeting elderly clients at Cash Quick Plus. Mom started parroting Jerry's version of events. After he showed her the edited videos, she confronted me in her kitchen, holding her phone like evidence in a courtroom. Her voice shook as she repeated Jerry's lies about my supposed gambling debts, asking why I dragged my brother into criminal activity. The betrayal in her eyes cut deeper than any accusation. Ring doorbell footage surfaced, showing me at Mrs. Chen's apartment complex at 3 a.m. I'd gone there to gather evidence of Jerry's visits, but the video told a different story. The grainy footage showed me lurking near her door, checking windows, behavior that looked predatory without context. Jerry had anticipated my investigation and turned it into ammunition. Cash Quick Plus security flagged me as a potential threat after Jerry filed a preemptive report. He'd claimed I was stalking and harassing him at work, that I'd threatened violence against elderly clients. The security team circulated my photo to all branches with instructions to call police if I appeared. My attempts to gather evidence were systematically blocked. I drained my remaining savings to hire a private investigator. The PI discovered Jerry's 5 visits to Tommy Nguyen's underground casino through parking garage timestamps. Each visit corresponded with massive losses, approximately $30,000 disappearing per night. The pattern showed Jerry chasing losses with Mrs. Chen's money, trying to win back what he'd stolen before anyone noticed. Jerry's Instagram stories accidentally revealed more than he intended. In the background of a selfie, Bianca's father met with known money launderers at one of his Subway locations. The men exchanging envelopes while Jerry posed with his coffee, oblivious to the evidence he was creating. His need for social media validation was documenting crimes in real time. My therapist called an emergency session, legally required to report homicidal ideation. Jerry had stolen session recordings from my car, then doctored them to include threats I'd never made. The edited audio suggested I was planning violence against him and Mrs. Chen. My therapist's hands trembled as she explained her mandatory reporting obligations, another relationship Jerry had poisoned. I attempted to record Jerry during a planned meeting at a coffee shop. He spotted my phone immediately, his tell emerging as he blinked rapidly without missing a beat. He called 911 claiming I'd threatened him with a weapon. I left immediately, but not before he'd started hitting himself, creating bruises while on the phone with dispatch. The police report would show defensive wounds, painting me as the aggressor. Mom's upcoming heart surgery required both sons' consent for medical decisions. The hospital scheduled mandatory family meetings where Jerry and I had to sit in the same room. He used these sessions to demand my silence about Mrs. Chen, leveraging Mom's health against my conscience. Each meeting became a hostage negotiation, with our mother's life as collateral. Mom's cardiologist refused to testify about Jerry stealing her heart medication. I discovered Jerry had been taking her pills and selling them for street value, using the profits to fund his gambling. The doctor explained he couldn't risk his license over family drama, choosing professional self-preservation over truth. Another avenue for justice closed. I noticed Jerry wearing Dad's AA 20-year sobriety chip on a chain around his neck. The sight made me physically ill, knowing he wore it while high on benzos. He'd been using Dad's old dealer connections, the same network that had supplied Dad's final fatal dose. The chip swung like a pendulum as Jerry's hands shook from withdrawal. Jerry made an offer through a mutual acquaintance. He'd transfer the $180,000 gambling debt to my name with Tommy Nguyen if I stayed quiet about Mrs. Chen. The proposal came with photos of our childhood home, addresses of family members, subtle threats about what happened to people who owed Tommy money. Jerry framed my refusal as wanting him murdered by bookies rather than helping him get clean. My investigation revealed Jerry had been targeting elderly clients for 2 years. Mrs. Chen was his biggest score, but at least 5 others showed suspicious patterns. Bank records revealed systematic withdrawals, always just under reporting thresholds. Jerry had studied federal regulations, keeping each transaction small enough to avoid automatic flags. The scheme showed careful planning, not impulsive addiction. Bianca's father had been monitoring Jerry's activities through his money laundering network. He documented every suspicious transaction, building a leverage file. The Subway franchise owner needed someone inside Cash Quick Plus to clean his unreported cash. Jerry's position made him valuable, but only if he could be controlled. The engagement wasn't love. It was a business acquisition. My proof folder became a liability. The evidence I'd gathered could implicate me in Jerry's scheme due to the aita, authorized recipient status he'd secretly added to my name. Every document that proved his guilt also suggested my involvement. Prosecutors would see a conspiracy between brothers, not a victim trying to expose a crime. Jerry had made me radioactive to law enforcement. Mom faced an impossible choice when Tommy Nguyen's men approached her at the grocery store. They explained Jerry's debt in simple terms, making it clear the whole family was liable. She stood in the cereal aisle, these men discussing violence as casually as comparing prices. Her hands shook as she loaded groceries, knowing she'd already buried one son to addiction. Mom chose to mortgage the house to pay Jerry's debt. She called me afterward, voice flat with exhaustion, explaining I was no longer in her will. According to her, I'd caused all this trouble by investigating instead of helping Jerry quietly. The family home I'd grown up in now belonged to the bank, sacrificed to clean up Jerry's mess. She hung up before I could respond. I started attending Tommy Nguyen's underground poker games, not to gamble, but to befriend other addicts. They shared stories about his operation, enforcement methods, payment plans. I learned Tommy's weakness was his legitimate businesses, a chain of nail salons he used for laundering. The information came from broken people who recognized my desperation. One addict helping another navigate predators. I took a job at a competing check cashing store claiming I needed work after being fired. The manager didn't know about my connection to Jerry, hiring me based on fabricated references. Every day I smiled at elderly customers while learning how Jerry's schemes worked. The job felt like wearing a mask made of guilt, pretending normalcy while seeing potential victims everywhere. A whistleblower at Cash Quick Plus leaked news of an impending federal audit. The employee, terrified of being scapegoated, released internal documents showing systematic fraud. The leak revealed 9 employees would be blamed for executive-level failures. Jerry's name appeared on every list, but so did innocent workers who'd simply processed his transactions. My investigation had triggered a purge. Dad's former AA sponsor revealed the truth about his relapse. Jerry had reintroduced Dad to painkillers during cancer treatment, claiming they were different from street substances. He'd enabled Dad's addiction while playing the role of caretaker, supplying pills that exceeded prescribed doses. The sponsor had tried intervening, but Jerry convinced Dad that more medication meant better care. The spiral that killed Dad started with Jerry's misguided help. I missed Mom's heart surgery while investigating Tommy's operation. The hospital listed me as an emergency contact who declined to appear. In reality, I was meeting with one of Tommy's former enforcers, gathering information about Jerry's debt. Mom coded on the operating table while I sat in a parking garage, choosing revenge over family. She survived, but barely, waking to find only Jerry at her bedside. Legal fees from fighting the DUI charge drained my 401k. The public defender explained that Adderall from years ago shouldn't still be in my system, but challenging the test would cost thousands. I liquidated retirement savings to pay lawyers while Jerry gambled with stolen elderly funds. The irony wasn't lost on me, going broke trying to prove his theft while he spent the proceeds. Our confrontation at Dad's grave made local news. Jerry and I screaming at each other over his headstone, groundskeepers calling security. The cemetery banned us both permanently, citing disruption of other mourners. Dad's final resting place became another location we poisoned with our conflict. The local news clip circulated on social media, our family's dysfunction becoming public entertainment. My new job ended after a background check revealed the ongoing elder abuse investigation. Jerry's colleague's son worked in HR, flagging my application once he recognized the name. The termination came with no explanation, just security escorting me out. Word spread through the check cashing industry, making me unemployable in the only field where I could gather evidence. Living in my car became necessary after eviction. I parked in 24-hour grocery store lots, showering at the gym until they revoked my membership for non-payment. Through my windshield, I watched Jerry's social media posts about his new position as financial advisor to Bianca's father. He'd moved into their guest house, surrounded by luxury while I rationed gas money. Mom called from her hospital bed, voice weak from surgery complications. She begged me to stop the investigation before someone died like Dad. Her words carried weight, because she finally understood the connection between Jerry's enabling and Dad's OD. But she framed it as mutual destruction, saying his addiction called him and it was calling us too. She wanted peace through surrender, not justice. My investigation caused Cash Quick Plus to fire 3 innocent employees preemptively. Management needed scapegoats before federal auditors arrived. A single mother lost health insurance. A grandfather nearing retirement lost his pension. A young father lost stability. These people had only processed transactions Jerry submitted, but their signatures appeared on documents. My pursuit of justice had created more victims. The fired employees found me. The grandfather confronted me at a grocery store, his hands shaking with rage. He blamed me for destroying his family's future, for taking 40 years of work and making it worthless. His wife stood behind him, crying quietly as he detailed their son's medical bills, their daughter's college tuition now impossible. I stood there absorbing their pain, knowing he was right. Mrs. Chen was hospitalized from stress after learning about her missing money. Her son called me from her bedside, describing how she'd collapsed when reviewing bank statements. The woman who trusted Jerry with her life savings now faced medical bills she couldn't pay. Her faith in people had been shattered, along with her financial security. I listened to the beeping of her heart monitor through the phone. Bianca approached me at a gas station, her demeanor different from the party. She revealed her father's money laundering had destroyed her family years ago, that she'd been playing all sides. Her engagement to Jerry was strategic, designed to position herself for when everything collapsed. She asked if we were both victims of the same system, suggesting an alliance that felt like another trap. I made a calculated decision to publicly admit benefiting from Dad's OxyContin dealing. During a community meeting about the Cash Quick scandal, I stood up and confessed to knowing Dad sold pills to supplement cancer treatment costs. The admission was meant to establish credibility about Jerry's current crimes, but it backfired. People saw me as a hypocrite, condemning Jerry while admitting to similar moral failures. Evidence surfaced that shattered my self-perception. Security. Footage from Dad's funeral showed me introducing Jerry to his first bookie. I thought I was helping him process grief through small bets on sports, a distraction from pain. Instead, I'd created the pathway to his current destruction. The timestamp showed us shaking hands with a man who'd eventually introduced Jerry to Tommy Nguyen's high-stakes games. Tommy Nguyen moved the collection date after Jerry missed another payment. His enforcers delivered a simple message, 48 hours before they started hurting people. They included photos of my childhood home, circling family members in red marker. The threat wasn't subtle, but it was effective. Jerry's gambling debt had become a family death sentence. Jerry's delusions reached disturbing depths. He genuinely believed he was honoring Dad's legacy by helping elderly clients, comparing his theft to Dad's med dealing. In his mind, both were providing a service to suffering people. He'd convinced himself that Mrs. Chen wanted him to invest her money, that he was protecting her from inflation. The rationalization mixed real grief with narcissistic justification. I crossed my own ethical lines gathering information. I befriended gambling addicts in Tommy's circle, pretending to share their struggles while mining them for intelligence. These broken people trusted me with their stories, believing I was one of them. I used their pain as currency, trading empathy for information about Tommy's operation. I'd become a predator like Jerry, just hunting different prey. My moral center died as survival instinct took over. I manipulated Bianca into revealing her father's documentation of Jerry's crimes, playing on her desire for revenge against her father. She gave me access to files that proved Jerry's guilt, but the method felt like assault. I'd weaponized her trauma for my own purposes, becoming the monster I'd accused Jerry of being. Evidence of Jerry's guilt came with a price. Tommy's enforcer was arrested on unrelated charges, making Tommy desperate and unpredictable. My investigation had destabilized a delicate ecosystem of crime. Jerry's structured payment plan dissolved into chaos. The arrest meant Tommy needed money immediately. No more negotiations or extensions. Every action I'd taken to expose Jerry had accelerated the timeline to violence. Jerry's counterclaim gained credibility as consequences. Mounted. He argued my investigation had caused more harm than his original crimes. 3 people had lost jobs. Mrs. Chen was hospitalized, Mom had mortgaged her house, and violence loomed over everyone. He positioned himself as a flawed person trying to survive while painting me as a vengeful destroyer. The narrative found sympathy among those who'd suffered from my pursuit of justice. Everything hinged on Mom surviving surgery complications. She was the only witness who could testify about Jerry's theft of her medication, his manipulation of her finances, his role in Dad's death. But she lay in the ICU, machines breathing for her, while Jerry and I circled each other like wounded animals. Her testimony could save me or damn us both if she lived to give it. My information about Tommy's nail salon operations reached the wrong people. A rival organization saw opportunity in his vulnerability, moving into his territory. The neighborhood erupted in escalating violence as 2 groups fought for control. I'd intended to find leverage against Tommy. Instead, I'd started a war. Local businesses closed early. Families kept children inside. Everyone waiting for the shooting to start. Dad's old police contacts chose sides based on self-preservation. Those with dirty histories aligned with Tommy, needing his protection from corruption investigations. Others distanced themselves from everyone involved, retiring early or transferring departments. The thin blue line became a maze of conflicting loyalties, making official help impossible. Justice would only come from mutual destruction. The federal system's requirements created new obstacles. Jerry's elderly victims needed to testify, but several had dementia or were too frightened to appear. Mrs. Chen's testimony would be challenged due to her hospitalization and mental state. The legal system that should protect the vulnerable instead created barriers to justice. Competency evaluations, medical documentation, psychiatric assessments, all designed to establish capacity, but effectively silencing victims. Dad's former partner revealed he'd suspected Jerry's pharmacy thefts years ago. He showed me notes Dad had made documenting missing inventory that aligned with Jerry's shifts, but Dad was too sick from cancer to pursue it, too weakened by treatment to confront his son. He'd chosen love over law, enabling Jerry through inaction. The evidence existed, but came too late. Another ghost from our family's past. Files showed Dad's suspicious activity reports, half-completed forms he'd never submitted. His handwriting grew shakier as cancer progressed, words becoming illegible. He'd tried to do the right thing while dying, but Jerry had been there, helpful and supportive, ensuring the reports never reached management. My brother had watched Dad struggle with conscience and cancer simultaneously, playing caretaker, while covering crimes. The truth about Dad's death emerged through medical records and testimony. His OD was accidental, a desperate attempt to manage cancer pain, while Jerry supplied increasingly stronger doses. There was no murder, no grand conspiracy, just an addict enabled by his son's misguided love. Jerry had believed more medication meant less suffering, not understanding he was accelerating Dad's death. The tragedy was mundane, which made it worse. Jerry's theft network extended beyond our state. 5 facilities across 3 states showed similar patterns. Elderly victims with Jerry's digital fingerprint on their accounts. 23 confirmed victims over 2 years, with more emerging. As investigators dug deeper, the scale suggested careful planning, not crimes of opportunity. Jerry had built an empire on the trust of vulnerable people, monetizing their faith in him. Evidence revealed Dad's final months were spent trying to get Jerry help. Hospital? Visitors' logs showed Dad scheduling interventions from his bed, calling addiction counselors between chemotherapy sessions. He'd known Jerry was spiraling, but was too weak to intervene effectively. His last coherent conversation with nurses mentioned worrying about Jerry's future. Love persisted even as addiction destroyed them both. I finally accepted the truth about Dad's death and my role in creating Jerry's addiction. Justice meant acknowledging that Dad died from addiction. Jerry enabled. But I'd introduced Jerry to gambling as grief management. We'd both failed. Dad in different ways, creating a cycle of destruction that outlived him. There was no villain to blame, just broken people breaking others in predictable patterns. My decision crystallized while reviewing evidence. I would destroy Jerry, despite knowing it would destroy our entire family. The choice felt like stepping off a cliff. Inevitable once started. Mom would never forgive me. Extended family would scatter. Our name would become synonymous with scandal. But Mrs. Chen deserved justice, along with every other victim Jerry had created. Sometimes love means letting go, even when it burns everything down. Jerry's overconfidence provided the final evidence. During a recorded conversation with his NA sponsor, he bragged about controlling Dad's medication in his final days. He described making sure Dad had access to whatever he wanted, framing it as compassion while admitting to enabling. The recording captured Jerry's delusion perfectly, believing himself a hero while confessing to crimes. His narcissism had created the evidence that would convict him. I presented everything to federal investigators, offering full cooperation in exchange for immunity. The meeting took place in a sterile conference room, boxes of evidence covering the table. I signed document after document, each signature feeling like a betrayal and a liberation. Crossing that final moral line meant accepting my own complicity while ensuring Jerry faced consequences. The investigators thanked me with professional detachment, already planning arrests. Tommy's crew and federal agents converged on Jerry, simultaneously. Both groups had tracked him to Bianca's father's restaurant where he was conducting money laundering transactions. The parking lot became a convergence point for different types of justice. Tommy wanted his money. The feds wanted their arrest, and I wanted my brother to face the truth. 3 forces racing to reach Jerry first, each with different definitions of resolution. The hospital ICU erupted into chaos as Mom's monitors flatlined, while federal agents handcuffed Jerry at her bedside. His body convulsed from withdrawal. Benzos and opioids leaving his system simultaneously. The handcuffs clicked against the bed rail as he seized, agents stepping back while nurses rushed in with crash carts. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching medical staff work on Mom while Jerry thrashed against restraints. The convergence of consequences felt surreal. Mom dying from surgery complications while Jerry faced arrest for the crimes that caused her stress. Federal agents waited awkwardly as doctors shocked Mom's heart, the defibrillator's charge mixing with Jerry's withdrawal screams. Mom's heart restarted after 3 attempts. The relief lasted seconds before Jerry vomited blood, his body rejecting years of substance abuse. Paramedics sedated him for transport to the Federal Detention Center's medical wing. I watched them wheel my brother away, knowing withdrawal and custody meant suffering without family support. The lead investigator approached me in the hospital cafeteria hours later. She spread documents across the sticky table showing the full scope of Jerry's theft network. 23 elderly victims across 5 facilities. Systematic targeting over 2 years. The evidence I'd provided had triggered raids at multiple Cash Quick Plus locations that morning. Tommy Nagwan's lieutenant had been arrested trying to flee the state, facing decades in prison. He'd immediately offered testimony about Jerry's gambling debts. The man detailed how Jerry had tried winning back stolen money through increasingly desperate bets, each loss driving him to steal more from elderly clients. The cycle had accelerated until Jerry owed $180,000 he could never repay. Federal auditors discovered the theft totaled $450,000 across all victims. Jerry had perfected his system, keeping individual transactions under reporting thresholds while devastating multiple lives. Mrs. Chen's $50,000 represented his largest single theft, but dozens of smaller amounts added up to the largest elder fraud case by a single employee in state history. The investigator showed me victim impact statements. Elderly clients described trusting Jerry because he'd shared his father's death from cancer, using grief as a weapon to gain access. He'd positioned himself as understanding their loss, their vulnerability, then systematically drained their accounts. The manipulation felt worse than simple theft. Bianca's father's arrest happened simultaneously at his Subway franchise. Federal agents had connected his money laundering operation to Jerry's position at Cash Quick Plus. The engagement had been strategic positioning, using Jerry to clean unreported cash through elderly victims' accounts. The entire wedding had been cover for criminal enterprise. I returned to Mom's ICU room, finding her conscious but weak. She looked through me like I was transparent, refusing to acknowledge my presence. The nurse explained Mom had listed only Jerry as family, despite his arrest. I sat in the waiting room for hours hoping she'd change her mind. She never did. Jerry's public defender contacted me about testifying at sentencing. The lawyer explained Jerry faced 15 to 20 years depending on cooperation and mental health evaluations. He wanted character witnesses to argue for treatment instead of pure punishment. The request felt like asking me to save the person who destroyed our family. I visited Jerry in federal detention. He sat across reinforced glass, hands shaking from withdrawal. His eyes had cleared for the first time in years, forced sobriety revealing the person underneath addiction. He looked smaller, deflated, like a punctured balloon slowly losing air. Jerry's breakdown came suddenly. He sobbed about Dad, about failing everyone, about believing he was helping elderly clients like Dad had helped people with pills. The delusion had sustained him through 2 years of theft. Without substances numbing his conscience, reality crashed down. He begged me to explain his actions to Mom, to make her understand. I attended Mrs. Chen's competency evaluation at the prosecutor's request. She sat in a wheelchair, confusion evident as doctors asked about her missing money. Her son held her hand while she struggled to remember Jerry's name. The dementia had accelerated after discovering the theft, stress destroying what remained of her memory. The prosecutor explained that several victims couldn't testify due to mental decline or death. Jerry's calculated targeting of the vulnerable meant many would never see justice. Their families would pursue civil suits, but criminal prosecution relied on documentation rather than testimony. Paper trails would convict him where victims couldn't speak. Mom died 3 days before Jerry's sentencing. The surgery complications combined with stress had weakened her heart beyond repair. She passed alone, having barred me from her room. The nurse said her final words were about both her sons, but she wouldn't elaborate. Jerry learned about Mom's death in custody, denied release for the funeral. I spoke at Jerry's sentencing as promised. The courtroom felt smaller than expected, filled with victims' families rather than media. I explained our father's death, Jerry's addiction, my role in introducing him to gambling. The judge listened without expression, as I requested psychiatric treatment over pure incarceration. Jerry received 15 years with mandatory addiction treatment. The sentence included restitution he'd never fully pay, victims getting pennies on the dollar. Tommy Nagwan's organization faced separate prosecution, their testimony reducing Jerry's sentence slightly. Bianca's father got 20 years for money laundering, his franchise empire crumbling. I inherited nothing but debt and trauma from Mom's estate. The mortgaged house went to foreclosure, medical bills consuming any remaining equity, extended family scattered, unwilling to associate with our name. Local news coverage made us synonymous with elder fraud. Our family's destruction, becoming a cautionary tale. The cemetery where Dad was buried lifted their ban temporarily for Mom's funeral. Jerry attended in shackles, federal marshals standing nearby. We buried her next to Dad, neither son speaking. The small gathering dispersed quickly, leaving 2 brothers standing over parents we'd failed in different ways. I entered intensive therapy, finally accepting my role in creating Jerry's gambling addiction. The therapist helped me understand that introducing him to betting after Dad's funeral had been misguided grief management. I'd thought small distractions would help, never imagining the spiral that followed. The guilt felt appropriate, but not productive. 6 months later, I received a letter from Jerry in federal prison. He'd completed initial treatment, gaining clarity about his actions. He wrote about understanding how Dad's death had broken us both, how we'd each found destructive coping mechanisms. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just acknowledged the pain we'd caused each other and innocent victims. Mrs. Chen passed, away in a nursing home, never recovering her stolen funds. Her son sent me the obituary, a final reminder of consequences. Other victims faced similar fates. Financial security destroyed in their final years. The investigation had achieved justice, on paper while failing to restore what mattered most. I found work at a nonprofit, helping elderly people understand financial scams. The irony wasn't lost on me, teaching protection against people like Jerry. Each presentation felt like penance, warning others about family members who might exploit trust. The work provided purpose while reinforcing daily reminders of our destruction. Jerry serves his sentence at a federal facility with addiction treatment programs. Reports indicate he's responding well, though 15 years remains ahead. He'll emerge at 43, having spent his 30s behind bars. The gambling addiction that started with Pokemon cards had cost him everything meaningful. I live alone now, maintaining distance from remaining family. The apartment stays sparse, devoid of photos or memories. Sometimes I dream about different choices. Introducing Jerry to healthier grief management after Dad's funeral. But dwelling on alternatives serves no purpose. We made our choices, faced consequences, learned too late that some spirals can't be stopped once started.